सुदेवेन्द्र योगेन्द्रं नत्वा ज्ञानप्रदं गुरुं मुमुक्षूणां हितार्थाय तत्त्वबोधोऽभिधीयते। नित्यं शुद्धं निराभासं निराकारं निरञ्जनं नित्यबोधं चिदानन्दं गुरुं ब्रह्म नमामि।
You can see the next slide.
Yes. साधन चतुष्टय संपन्न अधिकारिणां मोक्ष साधन भूतं तत्व विवेक प्रकारं वक्ष्यामः। साधन चतुष्टय संपन्न अधिकारिणां मोक्ष साधन भूतं तत्व विवेक प्रकारं वक्ष्यामः। साधन चतुष्टयं किम्?
One second. Malini ji, your mic is on. Thanks. Yeah. Continue.
साधन चतुष्टयं किम्? नित्य नित्य वस्तु विवेकः इह मुत्रार्थ फल भोग विरागः शमदि षटक संपत्तिः
Shamadhi shatka sampattihi.
शमादि षटक संपत्तिः मुमुक्षुत्वं चेति।
Next slide hasn't come up.
No, मैम, हाँ अभी आ गया है। नित्य नित्य वस्तु विवेकः कः? नित्य वस्तु विवेक ब्रह्मा। Ma'am, this I'm looking through my phone, so it is a little small appearing to me. Can you just
Nityavastvekam brahma.
Nityavastvekam Brahma
Tadvyatiriktam sarvamanityam.
Tattvatiriktam Sarvanityam Sarvamanityam
Ayameva nityavastu vivekaha.
Ayameva Nityavastu Vivekaha
Viragaha kaha.
Viragaha Kaha
Iha swarga bhogeshu ichharahityam.
Iha Swarga Bhogeshu Ichharahityam
Kim nama vairagyam.
Kim Nama Vairagyam
Adridaragadveshavatvam.
Adiraga Dvesha Vatvam
Adridaragadveshavatvam.
Adriraraga Dvesha Vatvam
Iha mutrartha phala bhoga viragaha.
Iha Mutrartha Fal Bhoga Viragaha
इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यम्
इह स्वर्गभोगेषु इच्छाराहित्यम्.
Thanks. So we'll continue from here. We saw yesterday the importance of knowing, understanding what is true Vairagya. What is the Viveka-based Vairagya? And in Viveka-based Vairagya, the distinction is that there is no effort to drop things, to leave things, the minute the falsity of it is recognized. There is, in fact, pleasure and joy to discard away that which is not real, that which is not correct, that which is not what it should be. The minute the mind has seen a value as is, whatever it held previously as necessary or important or mandatory for existence, and when you find independence, that actually your existence is not really dependent on things and beings, and therefore you discover a freedom from inside. So Viveka based Vairagyam has no parallel gain, because that Vairagyam qualifies one for something which is an absolute gain, and nothing in the world is equivalent to it. So we saw that Nachiketas representing that Adhikari, Uttama Adhikari we call him, means his Viveka is sharpened by observation, by understanding, by following what is being said in subtle aspects of life also. His qualification has matured enough within for him to see things with their shortcomings. This would be the right way to say it. Everything in the world that our senses present to us have their own shortcomings. They have their ingrained limitations. They have in them a capsuled presence. They have in them some sort of a temporariness that is associated with it. Since everything that the world offers is temporary by its existence, by its swabhav, temporary in its swabhav, therefore, the wise one recognizes that their existence cannot be made permanent on those temporary things. They in their mind begin to, or I would say they in their minds work to disconnect this seemingly connected, associated thought that things from the world, people in the world, if I have them, I am better, I am more, I'm happier. They start disconnecting. And Nachiketas has shown that extraordinary clarity of recognizing the temporariness of everything that the world has to offer. And he has dridhata in his sankalp. He has dridhata in his vision that what his buddhi has accepted as correct, his own mind has been prepared to follow it through. A lot of times in Vedanta, we see that our intellects understand things faster than our minds follow suit. Means we still hold on to our previous thinking. The minute the classes are over, the minute the associations are over, the minute the topic is over, the understanding that the class offers seems to be only up to the time that the class is on. And after that, that may linger for some time. It may spurt up also occasionally. It may even remain there in memory. But somehow our mind is not connected to that knowledge. Our mind continues to think and feel the way it did before. It continues its old habitual patterns of thinking, which were jiva based, individual based, which were anyway the point of Vedanta, that they are flawed. So while the knowledge is giving us the clarity of truth, and the intellect appreciates it because the reasonings are flawless, the explanations are clear, we appreciate it. ठीक लगता है, गलत नहीं लगता, सही लगता है. We are not able to discard the thought as a wrong thought, what Vedanta tells us. But most of us leave the knowledge in that compartment of understanding, and somehow our minds continue with the older, means existing. Older इसलिए कह रहे हैं because the new understanding is supposed to transform the mind, but somehow we don't step up there. Habitually, it's not that we don't want to, it's just that we don't recognize that there is a gap between them which needs to be bridged, which Nachiketa shows us in his strength of affirmation. His mind has no resistance to all the things that normally a mind would enjoy. The sense pleasures that the mind seeks in itself. The sense pleasures alone is what the mind acknowledges as pleasures. This, in the light of higher knowledge, a person who has disciplined themselves or who has followed the knowledge and has got strength of purpose in them, their mind also follows the education. When the mind is under the individual care, means the mind is under individual control, then the knowledge that they have gained, what the intellect has given, offered as clear knowledge, this knowledge, the minute it is understood, mind loses its value. हम में हमारा कौन सी पर्सनालिटी का एस्पेक्ट है जो चीजों को पकड़ के रखता है? वो है हमारा माइंड. संग दोष is a nature of mind. संग दोष means उसको जिस संग में डाल दोगे ना, वो उसी संग का बन जाता है. संग दोष means उसके अंदर ये एक उसका स्वभाव है that if you leave it for a little while in the presence of anything, it becomes comfortable with that thing. It becomes that object or that being becomes known to us that our mind becomes comfortable with it, and once it's comfortable, then it starts identifying with those qualities and those traits or those whatever those objects, if they're objects, those objects that have to offer, and we don't recognize, but our mind starts to depend upon it. That is why as children, when children grow up, parents always warn us that be very careful of the company you keep. That company you keep means what? The mind is very fragile. The mind is very clay-like. It just absorbs. So very often a person is not discerning. So it just absorbs whatever comes through without thinking. The opposite of Sanga dosha is what is called Satsang. Satsang is also the same principle. If you keep your mind associated with the Sat related, truth related, higher related aspects of life, your mind absorbs them. Your mind also starts to identify with them. And the scriptures say obviously what is beneficial for you is, since the mind has the nature of Sangha dosh, might as well keep it in the right Sangha. And the right Sangha is called Satsanga. This is what would allow a mind to be trained, in the sense that one thing is, when the buddhi has understood, the mind follows it, because mind is not strong in itself. Mind अपने आप से इंसान को नहीं चला रहा, इंसान अपने माइंड को खुद अपने चला रहा है. It is not that the mind is making the person do things and want things. The person utilizes the mind to do things or not, whatever is good. It is the person who keeps a command over what is right and what is wrong, and the mind just follows. Mind obeys. Mind is listening. Nachiketas's mind is that. It showed no resistance to whatever pleasure in that normal aspect हम लोगों के अंदर, सबके अंदर संग दोष पे एक senses का based pleasure का एक attachment होता है. When the mind has got discipline to higher values or has heard the values and whose mind is under their control, वो सत्संग के association से the mind doesn't have the power to control the person, so has no resistance to give up the minute the buddhi becomes clear. जैसे ही इंसान को समझ में आता है सत्य क्या है, असत क्या है, रियल क्या है, नॉट सो रियल क्या है, हमारा भला किसमें है, हमारा नुकसान किसमें है, इन द हायर सेंस ऑल्सो, द माइंड डजंट हैव रेजिस्ट. वो पकड़ के नहीं रखता, नहीं लेकिन मुझे तो ये अच्छा लगता है, मुझे तो यही चाहिए, यू नो, वो दैट काइंड ऑफ अ कंडीशनल एग्जिस्टेंस इज नॉट देयर. एंड नचिकेता showed us very beautifully that mind which is following the clear buddhi. And he had told Yama, whatever you tempt me with, his buddhi is alert, means his mind is not so powerful that it slips into those temptations of wanting enjoyments of those pleasures. He is able to keep the mind under his own control and let the buddhi guide his situation and environment and that circumstance that had come. And as I said yesterday, this was the finest thing and the rarest thing that anyone could have got hold of, and he made use of that situation. How did he utilize the situation? He saw the possibility of gaining that rarest knowledge, being in association with the one who alone could know that. So in his language, Nachiketas very clearly tells Yama that this verse was the concluding verse, 20th verse. He says, wherever after death the being continues or doesn't continue, people say here in this world, I only want to be learning that from you, and that alone is my third boon. Uncompromising of that, he asks for it, and you find the difference of Vairagya. I am emphasizing a lot on this because the Shastra, Vedantic Shastra, starts when one has sadhana chatushtayam. We are doing sadhana chatushtayam. Viveka, Vairagya are two parts of it. Third and the fourth we are going to be doing. After this, when the real study starts of what is nityam and what is anityam, before that it said who's eligible for this study. And these were the eligibility criteria. When a person has Vairagyam, means his Viveka is sharp. उसको अपने आप से, with whatever practices or whatever observations of life, thinking, he has come to some conclusions of what seems temporary, and he's in search of what is real. He doesn't know what is real, but he very clearly sees what is not real. He very clearly sees what is temporary. That association between Viveka and Vairagya, this is what he said is my third boon. And he says, there is nothing parallel to it. Nayam na anyam tasmat nachiketa vrinite. I am not going to ask for anything else. With this, you see that this part of Vairagyam has been emphasized as one of the initial necessities for establishment of knowledge. I said before, knowledge and Vairagyam both are two sides of the same coin. You may call them as two pedals of a cycle. Viveka supports Vairagyam and Vairagyam supports Viveka. These two are to be discovered in oneself, and if one does not have these two in oneself, whether your Vairagyam is Manda, Madhyam or Tivra, those three will only indicate lesser or more struggle. Even a Manda Vairagyam is qualified for knowledge, but a complete Bhogi, whose mind is only wanting knowledge to only further their pleasures of life. If you want this Vidya to further pleasure your life, further add pleasures in your life, thinking that by knowledge I will learn techniques and methods with which I will gain more power or more clarity to get my desires fulfilled, etc., and therefore I will enjoy my life more, and therefore my idea is to be a bhogi, then certainly the knowledge, even if it is heard, there'll be no perception formation of it. There'll be no breakthroughs in those visions, because the whole starting point of gaining the knowledge is you're attaching it to a wrong end. If your attachment of the knowledge, you're attaching it for the purpose of bhoga in any form, in any sensory form of pleasure or acquisition in the world, power, status, wealth, anything in the world. वेदांता में तो डिफरेंस है ही नहीं, क्योंकि वर्ल्ड तो वर्ल्ड है, खत्म हो जाती है, वर्ल्ड के साथ सब कुछ उसमें डल जाता है. If your association is to want anything over there, then you're already at the wrong side. Means you may hear it, you may like it, you may think it's very clear, but heart to heart, the struggles to understand it are not going to ease, because you won't see the perception in it. Therefore, most of the Vedanta texts start by emphasizing on the necessity of Vairagya. There is a very famous text, Vairagya Shatakam, written by Bhartrhari. Bhartrhari was a king. I'm not going to go into a lot of details. He was a king before he took sannyas. He abandoned his kingdom, gave it away to his brother, and he has written 3 books of 100 verses each on 3 different topics. The beauty of this book is the author behind was a great bhogi. As a king, he was what you hear in one of those, Purana kathas and Raja, or in our history we have heard our Rajas were completely steeped into liquor and wine and women and pleasures and laziness and carelessness and heedlessness of their responsibility. So he was one of those Rajas. who was completely drowned into women and wine, completely intoxicated by sensory pleasures and the power that kinghood brings to him. At some point, some incident comes where suddenly he realizes the flaw of his approach to life and he decides to give it up. And he gives away the kingdom to his brother to rule it. And he takes sannyas close by, goes to a cave, and he writes 100 verses on 3 different topics. First topic was Niti Shatakam. Niti Shatakam means 100 verses on what should be Niti. Niti is say political gains or how do you run the society based on that. Next 100 verses he writes on Shringara Shatakam. Shringara Shatakam is how Shringar that women do, how that Shringar is. He just writes on it. I have not done that text, so I'm not sure what are the contents of it. But the topic is on Shringar. How he addresses those topic in those 100 verses, I have still not gone through the text. So I do not know. But idea is the same person talks on Niti, talks on Shringar, and then he culminates it with 100 verses on Vairagya. So in his mind, he has covered the 3 important aspects of Vedic vision: Artha, Kama, and Dharma. In Dharma, he comes to Vairagyam as a qualification for moksha, the 4th aspect. So in Artha, he does the Niti Shatakam. In Kama, he does the Shringara Shatakam. And in Dharma pursuit, he does the Vairagya Shatakam. And he shows in 100 verses, he shows different ways in which man deludes himself, and he gives its opposite reasoning to neutralize those delusions, those Shobhana Adhyasas with which that fanciful, cloudy living with which we associate our fulfillment with, and we postpone it to some tomorrow. ये मिलेगा फिर हम खुश होंगे, ये होगा तो I will be happy. Abhi I am little happy, but if I get that, I'll be more happy. The gradations of happiness that we put up to ourselves based on certain fulfillment of conditions. And the idea of Vairagyam that people have fear of because it almost gives them the thought that I will lose something. मेरे pleasures छूट जाएंगे. मेरा आनंद रह जाएगा. What if I don't have money? Vairagyam mein I will have to become a sadhu with tattered clothes, with matted locks, with a begging bowl, with he uses one of the words. He says this is kantha, is that stitch, when you just stitch patchwork kind of a stitch when you do. Wear clothes like that and just eat with what is given. So people have a lot of fear when you have a lot of desires. Vairagyam becomes fearful. And in this, one of the verses, he highlights the difference between raga and Vairagyam. And he clarifies that actually it is rag which gives fear. And only place where you have fearlessness in you is when whoever has Vairagyam is a fearless person. He has nothing to fear. But those who have Rag are the ones who have fear. So, when people wrongly associate Vairagyam with fear, actually it is their Rag which is preventing them. The Rag that they hold in them and want its fulfillment, it is that which brings up the fear. So in this one of the verses, the 31st verse of the 100 verses, he says, he shows how in everything there is a fear of something. Like if bhoge, in bhog, in whatever enjoyments, there is a fear of rog. Bhoge, roga bhayam. There is a fear of disease. if you like something and you eat a lot of it, there is a fear of disease. कुले च्युति भयम, अपने कुल पे जिसको बहुत प्राइड है, those lineages, that family lineages that people have a lot of pride in, heart to heart inside they have a fear of losing the status. Kule chuti bhayam, chuti means the fall of it. The rise they have enjoyed, but the minute there is a rise, there is also instantly a fear of its fall, that there could be a generation which will bring bad name to this. There may be a generation, there may be somebody in the generation which will bring down the status of the kula. Vittam, vitte nripalad bhayam. In wealth, there is fear of the kings. In present times, a little while ago at least, wherever there is wealth, there is fear of taxes. There'll be fear of you will be caught if you are holding the wealth. So where there is wealth, there'll be fear of losing the wealth. More important, there'll be fear of the people who can take away your wealth. And in one of the verses he puts over there, he says when people have become rich, there are people who have fear of their own children, that their own children, their own sons will take away the wealth from them. They will rob them of their wealth. They'll make them, they will take away all their wealth. So, vittam, vitte, nripalad bhayam. Nripala means king, means here in the context of someone who can take it away. Mane dainya bhayam. Wherever there is man, honor, when you are respected, when you are honored in the society, dainya bhayam. Dainya is humiliation. There is fear that you may be humiliated sometimes. So whenever there is honor, along with the honor, there is a fear of humiliation. Bale ripu bhayam. When there is strength, power, there is fear of enemies. When there is strength, there is fear of counter forces that can weaken you. Rupe jaraya bhayam. When there is beauty, there is fear of old age. Wherever there is beauty, there is fear of old age. Shastre vadi bhayam. The knowledgeable people, those who are learned in the Shastras, they are fearful of opponents. Somebody will ask something which will not be, and that learned status of theirs will, etc. So Shastri, if you're very learned also, you're not free of fear. A very learned person is now got fear of someone who can counter their learning. Someone who may come up and suddenly question their learning. Gune khalabhayam. Khalubhayam. Wherever there is virtue, there is fear of someone who is wicked around you. And we always say the good is always taken for a ride. So if you are a virtuous person, you are fearful of those who are wicked around you because they manipulate you, they can do it, and you in your virtue will not be able to retaliate back. You won't be able to respond back. So when there is virtues also, you are not fearless. With virtue, you have another kind of a fear. And the fear now is of the wicked people around you. But there'll be people around you who are not as virtuous as you are. So there is fear of that. Kaye kritant bhayam. Kritantat bhayam. Kaye in body. Kritant from death. When you are with a body, there is fear of death. This last line is something that is very inspiring. Sarvam vastu bhayanvitam. Sarvam vastu. Everything in the world, har vastu is mixed with, endowed with, pervaded with bhaya, fear. Bhuvi, in this world. Sarvam vastu bhuvi bhayanvitam. Everything in this world has some grain, ingredient of bhaya with it. Nothing comes without fear. Whatever you may have has an ingrained fear along with it. Is there anything fearless? Can a man live fearlessly? He says, Bhuvin Rinam, in the world of men. So that is one sentence. The last section, Vairagyam eva abhayam. It is Vairagya alone that gives you fearlessness. Now, the one who has Vairagyam, look at all the above criteria. He could be a bhogi, means he's having pleasures, he's living in the world, so he's also enjoying the world, but he has Vairagyam. The entire context will change. He's no longer a bhogi in that sense. He's enjoying the pleasures, but he knows where to say no. He knows when it is enough and now it's harming his health. He will put a stop to it because he's not got the bhoga attachment. Sangha with the bhoga is not there. Vairagya. He doesn't have his raga grown to such an extent that his mind has overpowered his personality and has become a weakness for him and he just can't control it. So many people we know, if they have diabetes, and many people say, oh, I can't resist sweets. And the doctors have clearly said, one more morsel of sweet and you are already to be shifted to the hospital. But the minute they see the sweet, can't control. Vairagyam means what? He has no fear of any of this, whether it is kula, whether it is vittam, whether it is man, whether it is bal, whether it is roop, whether it is shastra, whether it is gune, whether it is kaya, anything he can have in the world. Everything he can have in the world. In fact, the more the vairagyam you have, more chances of you having all this is there, because somehow the law of nature is, if you don't run after it, those things start run after you. So there is a very strong possibility that if you don't run after these things start coming to you. Now when they come to you, if you develop a fondness, a weakness for them, you attach with them and you find that weakness coming in the personality, in your system, very soon you will identify with the fear in you. The fear there tells us clearly what is rag. And fearlessness with it tells us clearly that you are on the right track. So Vairagyam is indicative with the degree of fearlessness that one holds in oneself, with reference to everything being short-lived. You look at this verse, everything here by nature is anyway short-lived. There is nothing that's going to be lasting forever. Your vitt can't last forever, your bhog can't last forever, your man can't last forever, your roop can't last forever, your shastra vidya can't last forever. Nothing can, your kaya can't last forever, nothing can last forever by its very common sense. But if you're attached to it, you fear the loss of it. But if you understand it is anyway temporary, as long as it's there, it's fine. A good experience will be anyway pleasurable. So you cannot deny that pleasure out of your system. It is happiness in itself, but that but is so huge because the jiva is careful, the individual is so careful. He just cannot delude himself to believe that this is going to be lasting. Therefore, he retains the independence, he retains that fearlessness with reference to its loss. He is not घबराहट नहीं होती है कि अगर ये बदल गया तो क्या होगा. A lot of us have this, क्या होगा, कल क्या होगा. All of us have it. None of us is an exception. Yes, we all have it. But the question is, how much do we suffer from it? Every human being, it's a natural thought. Everybody will have it. Everybody should have it. But how much do you suffer from it? Where there is Vairagyam, even if the thought is there, it is a discerned thought. It is not something that gives you fear. So this is one of the verses. There is another verse also very beautiful with reference to Vairagyam, and this is very popular, Bhaja Govindam by Adi Shankaracharya, and he just gives it in one. There, almost all the verses are based on Vairagyam, but just another way of saying, Ma kuru dhanajana yavvana garvam. Ma kuru, do not do. Pride and do not take pride. Garv mat karo. Do not take pride in dhana jana yavvana. Do not take pride in your wealth or your kin, or means your family, your following, whatever, and yavvan, your youth. Do not take pride in these. Harati nimeshat kala sarvam. Harati, within a blink. Nimeshat, eyes of, by the time your eye has blinked, in that moment, in the moment of a blink of an eye, kalaha harati sarvam. Harati means robbing away. Khinch lena. Har lena. Har, ri is the dhatu. Har lena, to rob it away. Harati, kalaha, kala. Remember, yama is kala. Kalaha sarvam. Everything is taken away by kala. In a blink. In a moment, as much of a blink of an eye. Kalaha takes away everything. Maya mayam idam akhilam. Hitva. See that the whole world, everything that you are seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, everything that you are contacting is maya midam, is only illusory. Illusory in the sense it is mithya. That's the word, since you are used to that word. Mithya and maya you can take at this stage as synonyms. Maya midam. The whole of this is only a temporary existence. That illusion should mean only temporary existence. Brahma padam tvam. Therefore, because all of this is temporary, tvam, you, pravisha, enter. Brahma padam viditva. Enter into the inquiry of the Brahma pada. Tat tvam asi. Asi means that. Tat, Brahman, tvam, you, asi, are. Enter into the inquiry of your nature being Brahman. Do not take pride in these short-lived moments or pleasures or acquisitions or gains. These are short-term. Develop the right word would be, your buddhi should have the overview, the memory, the knowledge of an overview of everything that on one level your life is living and giving. Above that, the vision remains to say, all this, even while I'm living and gaining and giving and taking and everything is happening, all this is temporary. And that steadiness with which that vision remains, it is that steadiness with which he says, enter while you still have life. Enter into the inquiry of your nature as Brahman. There are many verses over there, but this is just to say a few of these. And another one which is very famous also, and most of the people, these are very famous in society. Having got quoted so often, like Vairagya Shatakam hasn't been quoted very often, but Bhaj Govindam gets quoted very often, and Vivek Chudamani gets quoted very often. So these are verses from these. In Viveka Chudamani, he gives a very beautiful indication again. He calls here Vairagi as Viraktaha. Raktaha, remember we said, comes from Ranj Dhatu. Viragme, when we did that, Ranj meant coloring. Coloring means that which colors your vision. Therefore, you form the rag and you form attachments. Virakta means Vairagi, the one who doesn't have these. He says here, Viraktasya eva yujyate. For the one who is Viraktaha, the English translation is detached. The one who is Viraktaha, Antaha tyagaha bahihi tyagaha yujyate. The internal renunciation and the external renunciation is possible only for one who is detached, who is Viraktaha. In which, for what? Tyajanta bahihi sangaha viraktaha tu mumukshaya. For the sake of moksha, for the sake of liberation. Tu, indeed, viraktaha, the one who is a vairagi, sangaha, tyajat, antaha bahihi, tyajati antaha bahihi sangaha. Tyajatyantar bahis sangaha means tyajati antaha bahihi sangaha. He gives up, renounces the sangaha which is inside and outside. For what? For sake of his inner freedom. Moksha ko aap freedom se translate kar lo. Which means even at a relative level, day-to-day life, there are small things that disturb us. They're not actually big things. Most of the people, I presume and I think, most of the people are equipped to handle big issues. But choti baatein, it is choti cheezein. Zindagi, roz ki choti, those are the ones that kind of disturb the mind. Because their hopes and expectations, and they're very small to be able to really call them as big issues. But they are still there that they disturb the mind. He says, Tyajanti bahihi antaha sangaha. Viraktaha mumukshaya. For the sake of finding that peace again. Shanti. For your own sake to find Shanti again. So moksha can be in the absolute sense. For absolute sense, of course, all these texts are applicable. But till we are qualified for that absolute, we bring it down to relative at least so that we are able to understand what it means in the immediate sense. So in the immediate sense, it says your immediate disturbances also. You can only find your Shanti if your aim in life is to discover the Shanti. If you are not going to want Shanti again and want to discover your Shanti, you will not be easily giving it up, because you will see it is my holding them that makes me disturbed. So if I have to find my peace, what should I do? I have to see that they are not as worthy as I think they are. I'm not talking of people or anything. It means that issue is not as worthy as I have given it importance, so that it disturbs me. So I start to give up the importance on those issues. And when I start to give that importance, I find my mind quietening. He says only the one who desires freedom is the one who will find himself capable of giving up his false attachments to things that disturb them. Then he gives, what are those external and internal disturbance causing things, attachments? Bahihi tu vishayai sangaha. What are the external sangas? Are those where you are attached to sense objects. Vishaya. Vishaya here means Indriya Vishaya. Indriya Vishaya means sense objects. When you are attached to sense objects, tatha antara aham adi bhihi. And your sangha inside is with your aham, ego. Adi bihi, kama, krodha, lobha, moha, mada, matsarya. When you are attached inside with your ahankar, with your desires, your greed, your jealousies, your envies, your fears, your attachments, your phobias, your anxieties, when you're inside, you're attached to all this, and outside, a person gets attached to objects. Viraktaha eva shaknoti tyaktum. Only the one who has virakti inside. For him, it is possible to give these two up. Attachments to objects and attachments to your own egos, one's own egos, one's own desires, one's own false expectations, अंदर से जो disturb हमको कर रहा है, you will have the capacity to give them up. Brahmani nishtitaha. For the one who is established in Brahman. Nishthit hai Brahman. For the one who is established in Brahman is the one who gives it up. This, there is still more. So with this, we come to most of the topics, understanding is clear. The understanding of what is Vairagyam, the topic of Vairagyam in understanding is overall completed. But what one will now want to gain a little more about is when it is said, how will I, supposing I am a desirous person of spiritual values, higher growth, eligibility, how do I work more? I find some weaknesses in me. I find some things that I don't easily give up. I find difficult. I'm holding on to. I want to. Now I've understood I should for my peace. But अभी मुझे समझ नहीं आ रहा कैसे करना है. Shastra gives us an amazing technique. I'm going to just introduce today, and then we will touch upon this in details next week because there is a lot more to it. I think you can now see this slide. This technique that Shastra tells us, which can help us to strengthen Vairagya, which can help us to gain more, retain our Vivek Buddhi longer. That technique is called Pratipaksha Bhavana. Again, I'm reminding ourselves because many people don't understand this, that Vedanta is, this is not Vedanta, this is qualification for Vedanta. But we need to know this because unless until we don't have it, we don't enter Vedanta. Pratipaksha Bhavana is actually a Yoga Sutra, a Patanjali Yoga Sutra. It comes from the yoga school of thought. So Vedanta is starting, say, at this point from only Mahavakya Jnanam, Tattvamasi, you are Brahman, and giving knowledge of that. Before that is all the eligibility processes, which is mentioned here as Sadhana Chatushtayam, and many other schools of thoughts like Vishishta Advaitam sometimes, and yoga in a lot of places. Sankhya in its explanation. Vedanta will borrow things from here to convey to those who still are making eligibility. So Pratipaksha Bhavana means Vedanta will accept certain aspects of all these schools of thought. But a discerning student understands that they come from there means, I will be very articulate on this. It is not very articulately said. I haven't heard it so. Therefore, if it is not said articulately, it puts you into some sort of an internal struggle to find the truth of it. If it comes from another school of thought, then that school of thought has its own grounds and principles on which it was said. So while Vedanta accepts the Pratipaksha Bhavana and tells us only in a general way to utilize it to dissolve away our over attachments or those things that disturb us, apply Pratipaksha Bhavana and quieten yourself. The yoga school has the entire process of application of it. The point is application of it. Vedanta will only say use it. Pratipaksha Bhavana शास्त्रों में दिया हुआ है is only giving us information. But Vedanta will not tell us what is Pratipaksha, how to do Pratipaksha. All that is not a topic of Vedanta. Vedanta says if you find yourself disturbed, and these topics, as I said, 50, 60 years ago, were only given in Gurukulas. That also very traditional Gurukula. Vedanta was given to very traditional brahmacharis who would take the vows of yamas and niyamas and live them. Vedanta was not given the way we are giving it now, available and without any conditions of self-disciplines. In those few years, few decades ago also, Vedanta was given presuming that the student of Vedanta is going to undergo few disciplines, and if you didn't have those disciplines, they were these mentions to say use them for your disciplines. Pratipaksha Bhavana is one of them. This I will take up in details because the whole topic in itself, I'll try and cover it as best as I can at that stage, and we'll continue next week. The class here. सर्वे भवन्तु सुखिनः, सर्वे सन्तु निरामयाः, सर्वे भद्राणि पश्यन्तु, मा कश्चित् दुःखभाग् भवेत्।